Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Welcome back to the course titled Strategic Communication for Sustainable Development. My name is Aradhna, Malik, and I have been going through this course with you. Today is the last class that we have for this course. So I'm going to be sharing a few things with you in this course, and those are, we'll wind up a little bit. We've talked about various things. We've talked about the different types of communication that we can have. We've talked about what sustainable development is. We've talked about how it plays out. We've talked about how you can strategize communication. We'll just wind up with a typology of communication roles in the strategy making process, and then we will talk about a few challenges to strategic communication for sustainable development, and then we'll revise whatever we did, and then I will show you some very interesting examples of how strategic communication initiatives have been used in promoting sustainable development in different sectors, and that is how we will finish. So I'll go through this very, very quickly. Now, when we talk about communication roles, we've talked about what happens, how we make strategies and all, but how are we essentially, what are we doing in our roles as people who are communicating, who are talking to other people? That is what this part of the presentation today deals with. And see, the role of the top management, this is from a paper by Moss and Warnaby, and the role of the top management, the role of the organization's members, the communication style they adopt, and the communication orientation are discussed here. So if the top manager behaves like a commander, if the communication will be unidirectional, and the role of the organization's members, the people who are listening to the commander, will be soldiers. The communication style will be unidirectional, one-way communication. I've used the abbreviation COMM because of lack of space. If I write the whole word communication, then the table goes down. So just to keep things readable, I've used COMM for communication here in this particular slide. The objective is to inform and impel action in times of crisis, in times of immediate, where we need immediate action. Unidirectional communication works best where we have deadlines to finish, where we have to implement. Implementation of policies is different, but when there is a crisis, we just need things done. At that time, the person in charge of the whole activity could be an elder in the community, could be a senior member of the community, could be the most influential member of the community, could be anyone. So the top management, or the person who is handling the whole show, will have to take on the role of the commander, and the people who are implementing, or who are going to do what needs to be done, will take on the role of soldiers. And it will be primarily one-way communication, and primarily with internal stakeholders, with limited communication with external stakeholders. We don't need to tell the rest of the world what we are going to do. Maybe there's a flood in the village. What do we need to do? We need to save lives. Number one priority is to save lives. We need to get people out. First is saving lives, second is saving property. So we first save lives. We just say get out, leave your homes, move out, move to a safe region. We cannot have discussions with the community at that point, explain the pros and cons. All we have to say is water is coming, you will die if you don't run for your lives. So that there's a, this is the arrangement we have made, there's a boat waiting, get into the boat and go. So that time it is unidirectional. So then coach, when we need, in different, at certain times we may need to play the role of coaches. People who are directing the whole effort may need to play the role of a coach, and the organization's members become players. So it's inspirational. We need to motivate people. We need to tell people that, look, if we don't if we don't look after our environment, we could have floods, we could have famines, we could have a drought, we could lose our land, the land's fertility will go. So please do. The first instance is go do it. Number two, in the second instance, we are saying please do it because that is the message that is going. So it's a two-way communication. The objective is inspirational. The objective is to persuade and encourage action. We are not forcing action. We are not asking people to do something. We are just saying that this is why you should do it. If you do it, you will stand to benefit. So it's oriented both to internal and external stakeholders, and it's aimed at communicating the vision. Again, I'm taking it out of the context in which this paper was written. We need to, these are things that we can implement even in the field. So it is oriented both to internal and external stakeholders, people who are actually going to be affected by the activity that is being suggested, and people who might be contributing in terms of resources, in terms of time, the external people who might be getting affected tangentially, not directly. So it's aimed at communicating the vision, the direction of the activity that is going to take place, or that is being requested to be done. Then boss or subordinate, that is another role that, the way we communicate, another role that could come to the fore would be, again, boss and subordinate, informational. Objective is to inform and explain, primarily one-way communication. Receptive to communication, the communication orientation is receptive to communication from external stakeholders to aid decision making. There are people who want to invest in communities that need help. They have time to offer, they have money that they would like to put in there. So at that time, when we are taking the views of the external stakeholders and we are taking them to the field, again, this is totally against what I have been telling you right from the beginning. I am insisting on participation, but when somebody is investing money, they need some things done. We can communicate the abilities, the concerns of the community to the people who are putting in money. But at times, we need to give them, if they're putting in money, we have to give them what they want, otherwise they will not invest money. So there are certain things that need to be done to satisfy the people who have pumped in money also, people who have pumped in their efforts also, people who brought in a new perspective to the area also need to be satisfied. Their goals, their ideas also need to be implemented. So again, first, and again, it's a dance of communication. Sometimes you hear one person, one side of the story, sometimes you hear the other side of the story, but you take a decision based on both sides of the story. So here, the person making the decisions is receptive to communication from external stakeholders to aid decision making. Then sometimes we adopt the role of facilitators. So we become, the organization's members become participants. The people who are actually doing things in the field become participants. And the role here, or the communication style, is enabling style. The objective is to inform and explain. Again, primarily one-way communication. In participatory communication, we are getting the information. People are going to come up to us and ask us why. Tell us why should I do this? Why should I be careful about the environment? Why should I, take care of my environment? Why should I not use plastic bags? Stuff like that. So at that time, it is again informational. So the idea is to inform. The idea is to encourage people, again through explanation. This is different from inspirational. Inspirational would appeal to people's emotions. Here, enabling would appeal to people's logic. This is why it's not only for your future generations, for yourself also. This is why if you use too much of plastic, you bury it in one corner of the field, you will find that it remains the same even after 2 years, as opposed to you using paper bags, which will be consumed by the soil, which will become part of the soil, in the next in a reasonable amount of time. Maybe after 6 months, if you dig out the same place, you may not find paper, you'll just find soil, or you'll find the paper has been eaten up or has disintegrated. It's become part of the soil. So again, the enabling is more appealing to the logic. It's appealing more to the logic of the people than emotions. It's oriented both to internal and external stakeholders. emphasizing on mutual understanding. Here the idea is understanding, not emotions. When we talk about coach and player, we are also looking after the emotional aspect of people. I mean, human beings are so complex. When we are dealing with each other, I'm not just a machine, I'm not just a resource, I'm not just going in to do things, I'm not dealing with machines, I'm dealing with human emotions, I'm dealing with human aspirations, I'm dealing with human energy, I'm dealing with human moods, I'm dealing with a whole bunch of things. So I have to appeal to every aspect of human behavior. Then the last one is sponsor. Sometimes when we talk to people, we have to adopt the role of sponsors, and the people who are going to take action will become the entrepreneurs. And the role is motivational. The objective is to inform and motivate people to do new things, to come out of their shells, to look beyond whatever they have been doing. So it is inspirational, it is motivational, two-way, upwards and down. So we talk to everybody who, and you know, the communication goes in all directions here, and it is oriented to internal stakeholders to facilitate performance and stakeholder views, to find out what they can and cannot do, what they are open to and not open to doing, and then encourage them to look beyond whatever they have been doing so far and do something new. Okay, so that is sometimes, as communicators, as strategic communicators who have the energy, the willingness and the resources to go and do something in the community, this is the role we have to adopt. And that is how we can strategize our communication when we use, you know, we use these, or we put on these hats at different points in our communication with the community. And again, you'll say, throughout this presentation you have been talking about, throughout your classes you've been talking about myself and the others. I'm talking from that perspective because many of us are outsiders to the communities we want to service, and we need to become insiders. As true insiders, we cannot really, you know, many times we are not able to see beyond whatever we are doing because the problems are so complex. There is inertia, there is this weight of the experiences that we are going through that are connecting us so tightly to the community that we are a part of, that we cannot separate ourselves, we cannot lift up, or we cannot, you know, get out of that milieu, that environment, and see things from a different perspective. And that is why I have adopted this you know, self and the other type of view that I have been taking right from the, you know, the voice that I'm doing. In communication terms we call it voice. So the voice is of self and the other, where I have taken myself out of that situation and I'm talking about we going into the community, we doing this for the community. But the whole idea centers around participation. Challenges to using strategic communication for sustainable development. Some challenges are, how can a change be created in the symbolic function attached to some aspects of use, so that without attacking strongly held values, changes of use could become desirable. When we go into the community, we don't want to change things that are already happening there. We don't want to, you know, we don't want to challenge the culture. I'm sorry, we want to change things, but we do not want to challenge the existing structure. So that is a big challenge here. What do we do in order to make the change acceptable, in order to make the proposed change non-threatening to the existing culture of the community we want to service? What can we learn from the existing experience about the design of communication strategies that can help us affect the knowledge, the attitudes and the behavior of people in relation to the notion of use? What can we do in order to integrate with the existing structure, the social structure, the cultural structure, the work structure, the way things are already happening? Again, I will repeat this, I've been saying this right from session 1. We cannot go into a community assuming that the community does not know what its problems are. They have not generated, you know, they may not have generated solutions that seem like solutions, but we cannot go into a community assuming that they do not know what they are dealing with, they do not have the capacity to generate solutions to deal with their problems the way an expert from outside can solve their problems. No, we cannot go into a community thinking that. We have to go into the community understanding, accepting the fact that the community is aware of its problems in a much better way than any outsider can be informed about the problems of the community. The community knows about its problems much more than an outsider ever can or ever will be able to know. The second thing we must understand is that the community has tried its level best to work within its limitations to generate solutions to its problems. What an outsider may see as a problem may not really be viewed as a problem by the community. So we cannot go in as outsiders and say, I know what is best for you and I'll do what is best for you. No, that is not the way to go about it. That is not the way to ensure sustainable communication. To ensure sustainable communication, going back to the typology, I cannot behave like a commander. I cannot behave like a boss. I cannot behave like even like a coach. The only or as a sponsor, the role that will facilitate or that will ensure that whatever expertise I'm taking in or whatever willingness, my positive energy that is going into the community will be accepted, will be the role of a facilitator. Out of all of these roles, the role that works best in sustainable communication for sustainable development is the role of a facilitator. Nothing else works as well as this. We first establish a relationship with the people in the community. We become one of them. We see things from their perspective. We take their inputs on everything that we are even thinking about regarding the community, and then we move forward as part of the community. No other role will work. If we go in as sponsors, then a hierarchy is created which no community likes. So we go in and we become part of them, and that's when these relationships that we build with the community help us understand what is really going on. Okay, how can we recognize leaders, followers, and potentially our most supportive partners? If we go into a community, there will always be people who others will listen to. There will always be people who will not want to voice their opinions, who will be too scared to offer an opinion, and there will always be people who will want to support the cause whether they have an opinion or not, and there will be a group of people that will want to oppose everything that a new person is saying. So we need to identify who these people are, and that becomes a challenge. Who's a leader, who's a potential troublemaker in the community, who can prevent any development efforts from going on, who is really genuinely concerned about helping the community. So every group has it, every community has such people, so we need to be able to identifying people engaged in different roles becomes a problem. How can we simultaneously work with government, people at large, and the business sector towards a revision of use of the strategies that are already being adopted by the community? What can we do? We cannot work in isolation. I cannot go in as a social worker and say I'm doing this and I'm doing that and nobody else knows what is going on. The government is doing something in its own capacity. The communities, that the external stakeholders that the communities within a village are connected to are doing their own thing. The people, the general population in that region is doing its own thing. So what exactly is it that I want to do in my role has to be integrated with whatever everybody else is doing. Many families within a village these days, because of the social mobility, people have families living outside the village. So the people who are connected, who have families within that village, would have their own agendas. So as people who are completely disconnected from a community, we need to understand how these people are connected to the outside world, what is already being done, how can I take everybody together with me, how can I fit into the different agendas, different visions, how can I fit my vision into the vision of these different stakeholders, and how can I move forward with that? How can we constantly increase the circle of partnership involved in the process? Who all can become partners, who all want to become partners, who all want to contribute, and how and why, and how can we sort of form this network? How can we develop this partnership in order to deal ethically with the revision of use of certain things, so as to ensure as a consequence the active participation of all partners. We don't want anyone to oppose our efforts. So what can we do in order to get the participation, get everybody on board, get everybody involved in the process of helping the community become more self-dependent while conserving the environment, while preserving the environment? And so in getting everybody on board, we need to find out, we need to understand how we can develop this partnership ethically so that nobody is offended. What specific actions will promote a revision of use material, that revision, and establish new cultural paradigms? When we talk about use, we are talking about use of resources that the community has at its disposal, and we are talking about the sustainable use of resources. So what specific actions will promote a revision of use, materialize that revision, and establish new cultural paradigms for a change in the way the resources are used? These are some of the challenges strategic communicators face while dealing with communities. Now, at this point, I'm going to take you through, this is pretty much the end of whatever it is that I wanted to tell you, the new information that I wanted to give you in this course. I'll quickly take you through a revision. We'll revise whatever we have done in the next maybe 5-7 minutes, and then I'll show you some very interesting resources that, or examples of how strategic communication is being used for sustainable development in different parts of the world. So going back to whatever we have studied so far, this is the whole presentation. So I will end the show here, and I will, okay, there seems to be some problem, yeah, okay. And of course, you know, the bottom line is the principles of sustainability communication. This is something that we did in lecture 3, so you can go through this list again. Now let's go through the whole presentation once again, right from the beginning. We started with the definition of sustainability, we talked about development, we talked about approaches to development, we talked about sustainable development, we talked about the 4 C's of sustainable development, we talked about the building blocks of sustainable development. Then we moved on to models for public participation in sustainable development, and I must tell you that this is the most important aspect of any effort that we put in for sustainable development. Public participation, participation of all stakeholders is the one, if you want to know what is the one thing that makes the world go round in the field of sustainable development, it is participation. We talked about different models: technocratic model, one-way Jeffersonian model, interactive Jeffersonian model, social constructionist model. And then we talked about communication for sustainable development. We talked about how communication is related to sustainability. We also talked about, we talked about a concept called sustainability communication, then methods in sustainability communication. We talked about the principles of sustainability communication. This is something that I've repeated towards the end also, you know, how sustainability communication can become most effective. And this is a paper by Bernhardt. So then we talked about the approaches to sustainability communication. We talked about strong and weak sustainability. Then we talked about natural capital. We talked about sustainability communication and integrative approach. We talked about the systems theoretical perspective of risk communication. We talked about science communication. Various approaches were discussed. We also talked about the challenges to sustainability challenges to sustainability communication. We talked about the sociological perspectives on sustainability communication. We talked about the symbolic interactionist perspective. Then we also talked about sustainability communication as a controversially structured field of discourse. Then we discussed the psychological aspects. We talked about principles of information and communication. We talked about strategies and instruments for promoting sustainable behavior. We talked about culture and sustainable development. We talked about challenges to participatory communication. Then we talked about the strategic communication for sustainable development, the role of communicator. We discussed Stein and Putz's model for corporate social responsibility, and we discussed it in the context of sustainable development. We talked about factors affecting attitude towards sustainability. We talked about culture. Then we discussed here, I'm sorry, I think that was a repetition. We talked about the application of Stein and Putz's model in the development sector. Then we discussed the tools of strategic communication for sustainable development, the report by GTZ. Then we talked about the key principles for strategies of sustainable development. Okay, various things were discussed. Analysis of stakeholders was there. So we talked about the stages and steps in model development. We compared CSR strategies. We talked about strategic conversations. We talked about creating strategic communication plans, identifying audiences, etc. We talked about the Combi model. We talked about communication and media, ICTs, and then we ended with we discussed the typology today. So a few things that I must show you, I think the time is running out. So a couple of things that I must show you here are, and I should have discussed this right in the beginning, the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. Now this is our guiding principles, and I kept it for the end. The Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations are the guiding factors for most sustainable development efforts in the whole world. Then I've given you this link in the slide. The other thing that I want to show you is the Sustainable Development Goals post 2015 agenda. Then there is a lecture by Professor R.B. Singh of Delhi University on the Indian experiences with the UN Sustainable Development Goals. You can view this lecture. There is so these are some of the examples of how the Sustainable Development Goals are being discussed. Some channels that help you understand what these goals are and how they are being applied are the International Program for the Development of Communication and the Communication Initiative Network. And so you can view this. Communication Initiative Network is a brilliant initiative to promote sustainable development and to promote communication for development in different sectors. It's very nice. Please become, it's a free membership. You can become members and you can get a whole bunch of or a whole lot of information about how communication is being used for development. It's very nice. The other thing that I want to show you here is some texts. You can go through these texts. There are various books that are available, some examples of commitment to environmental sustainability. I'm going to take the liberty of showing you this 3-minute video that is, I think we'll run a little bit beyond time, but I'm going to show this to you. So this video is very nice, and you can view this video how people, there's a company that is generating electricity by walking. So a company that, when we talk about sustainable development efforts, these are the efforts that are taking place. It's not when we talk about people, planet and profit. Now this particular clip, it's 3 minutes, but I think we'll finish the class in about 35 minutes as opposed to 30 minutes. So I'll show you, it's 3 minutes. So it's not only, we are not only doing this for the purpose of ensuring sustainability, it's also for the purpose of making profits. There are companies that are harnessing environmental different types of energy from different sources and using it to make profits, and those are the examples that I have shown you in this particular slide. So let's very quickly go through this.
Hi, my name is Lawrence Campbell-Cook. We're here today with Page Systems to install an energy generating floor at Simon Langton Grammar School in Kent in the United Kingdom.
Three of the stated aims of the school are creativity, innovation and altruism, and in terms of what PaveGen have done here, it's certainly creative and it's incredibly innovative, and what more could be altruistic than working towards the future of the planet. We only have to be down here at break time to see huge interest and huge excitement of our students who bounce up and down, they read the displays, and they're really, really very excited about having this in school.
PaveGen were asked to install an energy-generating walkway into a school with 1,100 pupils. Our technology converts the kinetic energy from a footstep into usable electricity. We're using 50% of the energy generated in a fun, interactive way. The other half of the energy is being stored and used to power some of the lighting within the corridor. An important aspect of the installation is that we monitor the data on site, but also remotely via our data logging equipment. This allows us to understand and process the data from the school on a daily basis.
Oh, well, the PaveGen installation looks superb because it's just a fantastic opportunity for the students to get a visual representation of what they're doing, the way they can harness energy. It's, you know, it looks good.
Of ensuring sustainable development by using the only resource that seems to be growing with time, that is the human energy, and the number of people in the world are growing. So again, various other examples are here, we don't have time for those, but then the bottom line, when we talk about strategic communication for sustainable development, we are talking about preservation of capacities or opportunities, preservation of well-being, we are talking about acceptable, workable and sustainable sustainability policies, we are talking about prioritization and adaptability, we are talking about equality, equitability and participatory democracy, and how do we ensure that all of these things are taken care of by communicating the above among stakeholders at the most appropriate time in the most effective manner. And the only way to doing it is participation, talking to people, participation, communication, participation, participation, participation. That is the only way to ensuring that our efforts in the area of development, sustainable development, ongoing development are come to fruition the way we want them to. So this course has been a very nice learning experience for me, and I hope you've also benefited from it, and I hope this course has given you enough food for thought to go and explore every thread that has been discussed in this course. And if I've left you with more ideas than you had when you came to this course, then I've really done my job properly. So I look forward to hearing from you in the forum, and I look forward to your comments and any questions that you may have regarding this course in the forum, and I look forward to interacting with you. Thank you very much for being a part of this course, and thank you very much for listening. Thank you.